Hey everybody, welcome back to the Son of a Blitch podcast. I'm your host George Blitch. I'm here today with Matthew Mitchell. How you doing, bud?
Pretty good. Glad to be back.
Man, I'm glad to have you here. So we've had one amazing start of the Texas hunting season. Man, September 1st. I can't believe it's here. This is incredible. What a day we've had.
Yeah, it has been incredible. Saw my first skunk. That was cool. Saw a copperhead. That was interesting encounter. Seeing a few dove flying around, but a lot of work actually.
Yes, a ton of work. Well, mention the skunk, man, and tell me the story that happened a few days ago and how that equates to
2 days
seeing
ago.
one.
I'm in my office and I don't know why that subject came up, but basically I was telling some people in my office that I'd never seen a skunk except for like in a car. And then all of a sudden, a couple of days later, first thing we do when we get into Polaris, riding around the ranch, boom, there's a skunk just crosses our trail. And it was just like, why does the universe work that way?
It's incredible, man. And I mean, followed by the possum, and then we saw the biggest bobcat we've ever seen.
It looked
out
like
here.
a deer.
It was incredible.
Yeah. I mean, until I saw the tail, I thought it was a deer.
I wish we had our third witness. We were driving around with the local NRCS agent, the National Resource Conservation Services. I think I've got that right. And they'll help you out if you're landowners who need some things. I mean, you know about this too, Matthew, but for those who don't, we were a part of the EQIP program. It's an environmental enhancement program, kind of improving the quality of the habitat around you for maybe the benefit of particular, wild game animals. In our particular instance, we wanted to work with white-tailed deer and turkey, and anything you're kind of doing to help them also helps benefit a lot of other species too, which are also natives. So it was cool. We had him out, and he was looking at some different things around the property that we might be able to be a part of these programs to kind of help out with some other things like pollination. A lot of pollinators are trying to help out with in some of these programs. And anyway, there's a whole myriad list of things there to look at. But it was just really cool when he was driving around with us and we saw this bobcat, and he totally missed it. Like he didn't see it at all, but it went right across us, and I mean, that thing was massive.
I don't know how he didn't see it.
I know, same here. Oh man, but either way, that we've seen a lot out here in the wild, and
Now this is a program that you've participated in before, right? With that agency.
yeah. There's so, and I might be botching it too, but I believe it's like kind of division of the USDA, and
Yeah.
it's your local agencies, your county agents, and so they'll have different people that are assigned to these different programs, and so. There's the CRP program. There's the EQIP program, the Environmental Quality Improvement Program, and that is we did ours where we took 23 acres and we bulldozed and we root plowed the area, and then we went through and disked it as well and prepared it, and like it was that itself was a kind of story that was pretty crazy, man. It was. We had gotten everything cleared and root plowed a little bit late because the guy who was doing it for us had some things going on and personally that affecting his health, and to where he couldn't really make it as often. And so we got done clearing things a little bit late, and it wasn't really the full scope of the project we wanted, but we ended up getting 23 acres cleared and root plowed, but by the time that came, it was like too late to plant these native grasses and these seeds, and that are like native to this area, right? So like the native grasses and the forbs, we had some blue stem, switchgrass, Indian grass, a handful of others, partridge peas as well, and some daisies, and it was a lot of things that would come up at different times, and it was really great seeding. I mean, we ended up getting it done the next year, but we ended up having to try to make sure the weeds weren't growing in and everything. Right. So we had to like plant some kind of cover crop, and we did oats, and it just took off. And it was all the wildlife would just love to be in there. But when the native grasses, we planted the next time, and that came through, that was incredible, because then we could see how, as it grew up over the years, There's a bedding area. It seemed like the turkeys were using it a lot. Maybe some really good cover and things in there for them too. So
Yeah, we're in Central Texas, and it's a rich environment in terms of the water, the trees, the grasses. Rich in terms of like supporting wildlife, like being a healthy place for really good habitat. Um, and so it sounds like you're saying you saw a big improvement by being a part of this program on this property.
oh, absolutely. It there's a lot of things that we want to do on kind of a grand scale, but you have to kind of pick and choose what you can do. And, some things like we did today, you can be able to see the improvements that were made in one day, and you can like check something small off your list. But for the 23 acres, for our property, that was a pretty good, amount to work with. And, seeing the machinery and everything that came out. I mean, this is a big project. It was pretty wild. I'll throw some pictures up and share those here too right now. But that is it was night and day difference on how it just felt for us too, because we just felt more connected to the land, and we're giving something back and trying to improve this, this wildlife, this habitat resource for them, and it's what we're experiencing in Central Texas is a different landscape than was here, thousands of years ago.
Oh,
And
sure.
so
Yeah.
there's a lot of that, that these native grasses that were originally there that work best with our soil, that grow well with these other, forbs throughout the year. And it's something that it's neat to have pockets of those throughout the property to kind of see. 'Cause it's just a little bit different than what's all around it with, the oaks, and, we got some mesquites, and, those things that just grow like crazy. So, there's areas that we didn't have that they're, growing in real thick now, but we got some beautiful pecans. And so there's some really neat, the live oak and the pecans, those are some beautiful trees out here. And, we got a big creek system too. So there's a lot of water that sits around there. So they're real, huge, tall, amazing, massive trees around that area. And then you'll like see our little field that we had cleared, and, it's just like the high grasses. It's kind of a neat thing to have that, diversity on your own property.
I think it's provided opportunity for you, family, and friends too, because like you can come out here at different times of year. It's not just like more interesting when deer season, or like hunting season for deer. I mean, like now April there's the turkeys because you created the habitat for the turkeys, and then in the summer, out in that big open field you have dewberry patches, and without that field those wouldn't be there. And so not only the animals benefit from it, but it's fun to pick those and make various dishes with that, and so I think also to be able to connect with your land that way as as an observer, and someone who comes out and helps you often with the work on the ranch, you get a lot of use out of the property and the land over the entire year. That, let's say if you're running cattle, nothing against that, if you're running cattle, it just really changes the entire place, or if you're really just looking at it from a harvesting deer perspective. I mean, I've enjoyed having my family come out here too to pick those dewberries or the grapes or whatever, and it's neat that that's kind of part of what is supposed to be natural here. Like you're improving the habitat to the way it should be.
Yeah. No, that's, because you do, like you were saying, like the dewberries, the Mustang grapes. There's, a lot of different types of things that are edible and forageable here that, and being able to have, those at your disposal is pretty awesome. And, we don't see that on a day to day. I mean, obviously we have family who lives here and sees it, and they send us pictures so we can kind of know when it's like the right time to, plan a trip down and make it here, and be able to, harvest some of those things. And we make, our own jellies and jams, as and, I've tried a bunch of, cobblers and things, and it's incredible to kind of use what you have. And so some of the things we're planning, it's not really, self-serving in that way, except in a roundabout way too. You're helping out these animals and the environment around them. And, we're also managing them and making sure that we're working with wild game biologists, and that the numbers of deer that they recommend to take, that we're trying to adhere to that to make sure that there's the most healthy ones in the area. And, there's problems with overpopulations, and there's a lot of things that you have to be cognizant of if you're someone who cares about wildlife. There are a lot of intricate details to where people who end up, which it's part of the, I think the relationship with the land here too that we have is that we'll take animals from the land that we're going to, put in our freezers, and we're going to make, meals with our family, and it'll still connect back to that time. And just like the cobbler does with the Mustang grapes, it's like you have these connections to something at a time in your life, and you get to like kind of relive them in a sense too, and kind of cook with your family and do all that. And those things are self-serving, in that sense, because they come back to you. It's like, but they're just, they grow here. I don't do anything to improve those. They're just wild, But these other things we're putting in the ground, it's for the animals, and so it's kind of cool when you can get out there and see a lot of moving around. I mean, just so much action. We see so much wildlife. But yeah, we're hunters, and we don't apologize for it, and it's how we were kind of born and raised, and it's what we put our own meat on the table.
But you become foragers too,
Totally. I mean, I'm learning new things all the time, and like always trying to research what's in our backyard. That was part of having having your local agency, because if you're a landowner, like you can call your NRCS agent and you can talk to them about programs or things that they might suggest, and the different things you can do and get soil samples. There's in Texas it's a fairly easy one to get done here. I assume in other states there's labs that send things out and find out if there's things you need to add to your soil to increase the nutrients to help your native plants, and identifying invasive species, and just different things you learn as you're going through them. And you pick up on them too, even though it's not your land. You have this connection to it, but you kind of grew up in not really in a hunting world, but then when you came into it, you were doing a lot of public land hunting, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And that's what's neat about public land, is because you have government agencies, sometimes they're using the land to forest trees, or there's private companies coming in and doing various things. But for the most part, these places are pristine, they're protected, and they're managing the land in a way of what we, at least for the last 100, 200, 300 years, find it to be native,
Yeah.
And so that's what I appreciate about like what you're doing here, and what we see here at this property, is that there's that mentality you have doing this wildlife program to sort of be your own government agency as a steward of this land, to try to keep it as natural as possible. Earlier you were talking about the wild game biologist. I know that's at a county level. And do you have a sense that the biologists at a county level are working with not working with, but have an idea of what these federal programs are about that you've been involved with, et cetera, where they kind of know what's going on and what habitat's here, and like how they kind of see the number of deer or turkeys on your property?
There's some connections there, because like we have a wildlife management program, and so in Texas there are some tax deferrals, and one of them in the agricultural world is you have some people have cattle or goats or sheep, whatever they have there too, and so you have this agricultural exemption. There's another one that really is about the benefit of the wildlife in our state of Texas here, and you have your connection there with your wildlife biologist. Ours, I think, has 2 different counties that he looks over, one in the surrounding one around here too, and that's a lot of land for him. But he come out and he'll do a site visit, set up a wildlife management plan, and so you can have some long-term goals, and there's certain criteria met with these programs, and I'll have to look it up, and I believe most of them are probably the same, but maybe there's been some new things too, so I don't want to kind of speak out of turn there. But for those who are initially getting their wildlife management plan together, you're going to work alongside a wild game biologist, and they're going to come out and maybe assess your land. The lady that was running this position when we first had them come out 10 years ago, she came and identified a lot of different types of browse species, and gave us some links to have these. There's some PDFs from the state that had a picture of maybe identifying this particular plant. This is what when it's flowering it looks like, or this is this one. This is what the seed pod looks like, and just things you could see around. And they're like, this is your level 1 browse species for deer. This is your level 2, and we were able to then identify those. And so they're.
And I'm sorry, this is at the state level.
This is at the state level
yeah.
here, yeah. And then, but the connection there was that. When you kind of identify all these things, you have someone that's very willing to help you out on that state level. You have that on your county level with the NRCS, and there's people that I'm making sure that they all know about it together, and it's very open book about what we're doing, because this program over here will benefit this habitat, which might change the numbers of deer we're seeing in a year, or maybe the turkey roosts are, they're more plentiful every year because you've done things that have helped the herd and the bird, and you're doing those things. And there's also these types of checklists with the wildlife tax deferral program there with wildlife management, where you have to hit like 7 different criteria, of the 7, you have to hit 3 of them. And so a lot of might be things that I've done with the NRCS agency about, the EQIP program, for instance, when we did all these, native grasses and forbs, that ended up being something that was an activity that also checked off this list for the criteria of what we're doing, with that wildlife management.
Like a big part of that is counting.
Yeah, surveying the deer,
surveying,
yep.
And that's a big effort today. We went around and made sure all the cameras were active. We tallied up deer we've been seeing so far while we've been here.
Yep.
And it's like an annual thing that has to be recorded such that the biologist can know the numbers of tags for harvest to hand out.
That's correct. And it runs, July, August, kind of was the end of July, for a while it was the beginning of August. You'd start to do, you're kind of tallying up what you're seeing in maybe wildlife, these cameras that are out there, right? So you got these awesome cellular cameras now that you can have, sending you pictures of what you're seeing, and in your kind of day by day, you can kind of tally up what it is. Okay, I saw 4 doe here and this, and so you can kind of a tally sheet from your game trail cameras, but you also have to have like incidental observations. So when the family's around the property each day and they're making their runs and stuff, if they see something that's out there, they'll be like, hey, we saw 3 doe in this field. Like, okay, thanks, cool. And so I'll record that, right? And then we'll come out, and obviously we do our stands where it's a stand count. And so in this instance, Matthew and I will be sitting in a different stand tomorrow morning, and we're going to be observing for a particular amount of hours and see how many animals come through. Because where you have a camera is not necessarily what you're seeing every day. It's just that little snapshot of, this window in this area of your ranch or your property. And
the stand's a blind.
Yeah, stand's a blind for the, there's a lot of times where it's like an elevated, you see a lot of 4x4, 4x6 boxes that are up in, in the.
It's like a bird blind that you'd find at like a park or a state park or.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of an observation area, really. And so, some of them are pretty fancy and fiberglass, and, some are insulated and you make your own. We've made some of our own here, and.
This is where you're ultimately hunting out of when it's hunting season.
So you're sitting up there and kind of waking up and seeing the first cracks of life in the morning, and really kind of watching the world wake up. It's like 30 minutes before kind of sunrise. It's like those birds, man. They'll just start, bam! They're just
one of my favorite
wide
parts.
Awake. It's amazing, and then it's like the world wakes up. You never know what you're gonna see, and it's incredible. And I mean, Matthew and I spend, I think, more time behind our cameras than we do rifles. We're just seeing all these amazing animals and these birds and taking some cool pictures, and it's a lot of fun to be able to then also get to where we can identify particular animals. I mean, we've seen, this one has a marking on the back of its, left ear. Man, okay, cool, man, it's Lefty. He's back here again. We've seen him 3 years in a row, and now he's this size or whatever. And it's just kind of a cool thing to watch them and be identifying them. So I highly encourage anybody who's out there hunting to get a decent camera that has a little zoom. You don't have to spend a lot of money. There's some ones out there that can kind of reach out and get you a good little picture. And it's kind of a cool thing to have with you and identifying certain animals or being what kind of bird was that? Hey, you can go look it up.
I mean, also just to have around all year round. I mean, like when you're out here over a number of days, there's always something you're gonna see. I mean, like going back to the skunk. I mean, like that totally unexpected, but we saw it.
Yeah.
And that's it's really interesting to be able to try to record.
Totally. And it's because like how neat would it be to have a recording of like that skunk, right? But it's hard to keep your eye on something that's moving and grab your camera and everything. It's like,
and
but
it's 11 at night.
Hey, exactly. Well, that's that. Yeah, we probably need to get some. I don't know if it'd pose for some lighting for us. You just wait. You're right there's perfect. Thank you.
just stand under the moonlight a little bit.
Yes.
So today is September 1st, and in this county that the hunting season's opened up, and we have dove and squirrel that can be hunted, and so today was definitely a work day. We did a lot of stuff, but it was fun to like have the shotgun ready and try to be opportunistic and be looking for game again, because like that is the fun side. And well, it's all fun, the work and the hunting side of everything, but it's really exciting today to know that this kicks off the season.
Yeah, there's a lot of dove hunters that were, limiting out at like 7:30 to 8 this morning, and I think we saw 2 like the entire day.
And it's not the property for it.
Not
I mean,
the property
there's
right.
This ranch has a few ponds but there's no like agriculture.
Right,
and a lot of I think a lot of the adjacent properties aren't that way either, because we're a little bit closer to a very small town, and there's properties around you.
Yeah, and it's just the area isn't prime for them. Now when we went down to our family ranch in Southwest Texas, I mean they were littered with doves. They're everywhere, man. It's of course it wasn't. And that's true. And it was also not dove season. So it was kind of like it's like the old joke, right? It's like, I should have been here yesterday. And, when it was dove season, they might not have been there at all. And so it's like, we just happened to see them. It's like, yeah, you're safe for now. But that was, that place is, it's a different dynamic. And so you just don't have that here. But we have way more turkeys here than over there too. And that's, the habitat here is right for them, where maybe it's right. It's along the flyway, like you mentioned, but they're hanging around different habitat right now. And that's why some, folks who know what they're doing, they're getting the right spots, they're getting their limit, and they're going to be cooking up some dove tonight, And so we were definitely work centric with everything. And we just got an amazing amount done. I still keep thinking about this pipe. There was an oil pipeline, 4-inch line that ran across our property, and no one knew at all what this went to, where it started, where it was
surveys,
going
right?
to.
It was never on any of the
nothing that we ever saw, and we thought, oh, maybe the Railroad Commission, who looks over and oversees the different oil lines, and they're kind of the main centralized database of that information, right? At least from my understanding. And we ended up having one of those. There's like a coupling got loose between the strands of these 4-inch pipe, and there might be like a 15 or 20 foot spacer, or space between the spacers, and that one got loose or whatever happened. I'm not sure. There's a couple areas we drive over it, and so over the time it might have just gotten loose, but we had some sludge that came out, and so we found out that we had to call the Railroad Commission. They sent out a guy to look at it, and he's like, okay, this is harmless. He's like, this is a bunch of old buildup and things too. And he's like, but he's like, in like 2 or 3 days, this will be gone. He's like, and it's not from like absorbing into the ground. He's like, there's all these little microbes and things like that will come in and take this stuff out. And I was like, really? He goes, yeah, this isn't like a big spill. He's like, we're dealing with stuff sometimes where, it feels like it's the ocean because there's some catastrophic failure that's happened. And it's like, we're dealing with big stuff. This is not a cause for concern. And it's not, it's basically you'll see it go away soon. And sure enough, he was right, man. Like it was like a week later. It's like
Oh,
couldn't
wow.
even tell it was like there. And so whatever that was, maybe it was just a bunch of old kind of crud and crude and just back water over time and soil that got in there, and it's just sludge. But it wasn't. I mean, it looked bad when we first saw it,
Mm-hmm.
but they came out and it ran a test and everything came back all right. So we didn't have to worry about anything after all, but we still then had this coupling that was coming loose and that pipe was bouncing. And we were able to get one section of it cut off. And so you'd have to kind of drive around it, but I just know that someone was going to hit that thing with the tractor, and I know that I've run over it quicker, just because it's kind of this one side of it's hidden. It's like probably 10 years ago we talked about doing that. And so we finally got out the sawzalls and some metal blade, and man, we cut it down, but you couldn't get the bottom, like couldn't get the angle to get the bottom because it's kind of like sitting on the top of the ground, right? And so we kind of got around the sides and shoveled out some dirt underneath and tried to angle it in there. And then our buddy Jacob Spradling showed up, and he's like, I got the solution. And he's like, grab the tow strap, and get in the back of the UTV, and we set it up all safely. We are just talking about how, that was something that we had kind of heard of some, tragic outcomes of people who are, not towing correctly, and some things that can happen, injuries. It's like you got to be really mindful of that kind of stuff too, really, because you can be like flying and snapping tow straps and metal flying in the air. It can be severe. And so we set everything up like super safe and just kind of like pulled at it very slow. And it, that 1 inch, 2 inch thing popped right off, man.
Yeah.
It was such an amazing thing. And then, we try to utilize everything that's around us there too. So we're going to take that. And what do you think? It's about 15 feet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think we cut it off probably 5 feet from the other coupling because it was kind of like around the property line. So yeah, it was probably like 20-foot sticks, and we probably cut it out at 15.
And you could probably cut like 5-foot sections and put it in low-lying areas.
Yeah, and well, I was thinking about, because there's so many other ones that will probably end up maybe kind of matching them around that size that was today's, like the 15-foot, and you land them across a road there, and that way you have enough length to where you can have all your
Different kinds of
vehicles
vehicles
and trailers
drive. Yeah,
that
that
go
makes
over
sense.
it. But you're saying the same ideas, like kind of getting some drainage out there and be able to kind of keep the water to where it's not eroding an area and it's passing through it. Obviously we have some erosion issues around here. Some of these waters and these floods that come in, it's like, man, these creek beds erode back pretty bad and eating up near roads. So,
Well, luckily Texas has had some, at least on the east part of Texas and central Texas, has some good rain over the last couple of weeks, where it had been a very dry, very hot summer. And so another benefit to ranch life, if you will, is sometimes you drive down the road and all of a sudden there's a tree that's laying over. And so that was a discovery we made when we came in last night and started driving around. There's a sizable oak tree that fell over. And so that was part of today's mission, was to cut enough limbs to be able to clear the road and just be able to drive through.
yeah, and where that oak tree fell, it was right at like a V. These two roads kind of come in together, and it blocked both their pathways. And so it was like one's kind of a little cut through bend, but it's like two roads were down then, two ways we've been able to take this little spot. And, you got to attend to that. That's part of like, the ranch life, right? You never know what's going to come. And do you remember the oak tree that fell along almost by the creek bed? That
Huge.
thing was massive. It was one
Took
of
a
the
bulldozer
largest
to move
ones.
it.
Oh, totally. I mean, it just so happened that, the bulldozer can do that work in about 10 minutes, maybe 15. And
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, just clearing it was probably a 20-foot tree that fell today.
Yeah.
Just clearing that out, that took some time. And it's September 1st, and it's the start of hunting season, but yet again, this was a work trip to the ranch, and these different things we're doing though does set up the rest of this of hunting season, and just sort of going into the fall and the winter, clearing a road, working on cameras and getting corn in these feeders, and just making sure that the motors are running and batteries are charged and all that stuff. And so I like this kind of work trip where it sort of fell right on the opening day.
Yeah, it's cool. There's an excitement of that, and it's like we're riding around with a shotgun, hoping that we get a chance, and hopefully tomorrow we can have a little bit of luck, and even if it's just the opportunity to get a couple dove and just kind of be like, all right, cool, man, just, cook up a little snack and it's try something new, and obviously we love doing that, and then all sorts of wild game recipes, but being here, it's an exciting thing. It's like it feels real that it's like, oh, hunting season's here, because you can have that, like, it's the day to mark it off on the calendar, right?
That's right.
And so to be here on that is fun, and to see all the different animals that we saw, it's really just it's incredible. It was a fun day. I mean, I don't know if you can start off a better way other than maybe limiting out on dove, if that's what you're doing. But for us, it wasn't about the dove primarily. It's like
Well, I
this.
mean,
It's like it was a, I don't know, man. It's like kind of this token of time. It's like, yeah, okay, now it's here, and now we're gonna start thinking more about our hunts
yeah,
and what we're gonna do this season.
we're predominantly big game hunters, so
Yeah,
a lot of what was happening today, again, was just sort of for future time in the hunting season, and there'll be some more work trips, and you just sort of like continue to hone in on the time period in which you can hunt deer and over the rut and times like that, and so I look forward to coming out here again and continuing to set up. What are some of the things that we would have to do next? Like again, the biologist is getting the numbers of deer that you're surveying. What's next, sort of on that agenda, if you're looking at it from a hunting perspective and kind of going towards that time?
yeah. So I'll be handing them off in a couple weeks, all the numbers from everything of our incidental observations, the stand counts, the game trails. The other thing is identifying how many bucks are on your property. So we'll tally up all the ones we've seen and all those different counts we've done, and hand that off there too. And so all this data gets put in with other county data that gets turned in, and things they've done on their own and whatnot, and they're running that out, and they can give you a certain number of buck and doe tags to give the healthiest ratio for them to keep, based on this particular area in this region. And it's very subjective on that, where you are and what some areas might not have as many white-tailed deer. They might not have as many tags per property or per hunter in that county, and that all differs for which counties you're in. So we'll get that for our particular county and our numbers here, and then that'll kind of give us an idea too of what we have on our plate, and then how many of our friends and family, what they're going to be putting in on their plate and in their freezers, because they'll come out here and they'll hunt, and so be like, all right, you guys, if want to take 2 does each or something or whatever it is, and be able to kind of let everyone know, or you take a buck and a doe. We have this many matured bucks this year, and getting towards the end of their life, and it's like that's these are the higher age class. You want to go after these here, and whatever it may be that we're telling folks, and we're still in the middle of combing through all the data. Right, we just got some of the SD cards, that some recent photos, and kind of repaired some of those. A lot of batteries, run out or fail, or something that just happens that loses cellular service. So once we compile all this, send that in there, get those numbers, and then that'll kind of, I guess, set up our next things. We didn't have rain for the longest time out here, and then we just had a couple good few weeks of rain that's been solid, so we're getting a lot of growth to where you didn't have to mow as much before. Now you're going to have to soon, and we do deferrals for mowing. It's part of one of the things with our wildlife management program too, and so there's certain times of the year, usually at the very beginning of the year, and kind of the winter months there, to even in July and things too, because also you have a lot of the fawns hitting the ground then too, so you want to be careful, and you're not just mowing these fields where there may be some fawns laying down. So there's things that we do there, and as a result, some years if there's a lot of rain, it's like you got a lot of mowing to catch up to, because you got to maintain it. It's like you can't. It's not. it's all, it depends on how much rain and things and what the conditions are. But some years you want a lot more. But
Yeah,
you
sometimes
had
like a
to.
road is cutting like a cut of or mowed lane through a field.
Absolutely, and
Yeah,
that's a lot of times that's how there's some areas that gets overgrown. You're like, where was the road that I've had here and been
right,
able to
right.
see, and
I think another thing that I look forward to after you like turn in the numbers to the biologist and continue to sort of like maintain, like cutting the grass and a few other elements is we start really paying attention to what's on the camera. Not that we weren't before, but more in terms of like now there's a list and there's sort of like rules about like what kind of bucks or even does that can be that you can take. And so in particular George will start really pouring through a lot of images, and so there's like all these like lists and rules that you're creating for not only yourself but anyone who's hunting here. And so that's a fun project to kind of start going through all that.
yeah, it really is, and that's we're like you said too. It's kind of the steps along the way too. It's like okay, remember we were putting a bug bomb in these the deer blinds because you just want to make sure you're not brushing elbows with a black widow or a scorpion and kind of
Awesome.
and we're bringing our families in here too, so it's not just for us. We're looking out for other people and any guests who may come here, and anybody who's family who comes around. It's like we want to make that a safe environment, and so that's one thing we've learned a lot. 'Cause a lot of wasps come in, like you're saying, man. I mean, there's been some bad times that have been had. You having jumping out of a deer stand if you're not out of it if it's elevated, but climbing down very fast, but you know moving out if there's some. I mean, I've seen some hundreds. I mean, we're talking like 500 yellow jackets, and
Oh
I
yeah.
didn't even notice it until because I got in early in the morning, shut the door behind me, and I was being all stealth, and then it's kind of cold out luckily, and it started to kind of light came in. I looked up, and it was just like the whole wall, and I was like, oh boy.
Time to cut.
I got out of there, I hunted from underneath the stand, and I was still worried that if I did take a shot, if that sound would stir him up, because it was like it was just a tough situation. So we've learned to do the things too. We're cleaning that up and just making sure that during kind of the off season too, if any bugs got in, taking care of that. And that was a good thing to, it's like next time we'll go in there and then we'll kind of look through the windows and see, that we have in there. It's like, okay, what do the shooting lanes look like? Oh man, that tree over there it's that would get in the way of us being able to see now only 125 yards. If we cut that, we might be able to see 200 yards and see, more animals. And
That's a little bit of a job year round too. I
that
mean,
is, it is. And, it comes to, like we were saying too, with the trees that come down too. All of a sudden it's like a branch could crack and it comes down. It wasn't an issue last week and you cleared that same path. And then now there's one hanging down. Where did that come from? But it's like we get a lot of wind out here. I mean, it's amazing when you have that many trees because we have a lot here to see what some of those storms could do. And I just know anytime there's high wind around here, it's, I'm going to be getting a phone call as, the family's going, okay, we did the rounds around the property and, uh-oh, it's not good, man. We got this big tree
number of
down.
trees.
All right, well, let's figure out who will help out on that and let's clear it. And you just got to tackle what's in front of you. But being able to kind of get out there and see the shooting lanes and then, a big part of gearing up for season is also making sure that, we're getting a lot of rifle time in too, or, shotgun as it may be, or even, training pistol too, but really kind of, especially for the big game hunting is making sure that we're shooting well, accurate. We're getting comfortable at, greater distances each year to where, hog steps out at, 350, I bet you'll put a bead right on it and drop it. And, you're going to have some awesome, delicious food in the freezer from that, and so it's like, if we don't practice that, we're not going to, hit those different marks along the way to where, it's like, I don't know if, we'd be shooting 350 at a deer because it's just iffy. A lot of things can happen, beyond that distance, but a
Yeah, I
hog,
mean
you can let fly.
yeah, that distance too with a deer, you have to have the right equipment
Yep.
in the blind with you. Some kind of camera or scope that could just magnify far enough out to see what deer you're looking at because just coming back around to
Yeah.
that notion of there's particular animals to shoot and not shoot.
Yes, yes, yes. That's a great thread to that, because that's so true. You got to know exactly your animal, and that's where with our cameras, for instance, that it's a one-piece unit. It has a really good zoom lens on it, and it doesn't break the bank, but it really allows us to get in there. I think what's like 65, 75, or 65 magnification.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's pretty amazing. And that's where we can identify that. And another thing too, you need in your pocket there with you, or part of your binoculars, or even the scopes have them now these days, is a rangefinder. I had an instance where a buddy of mine was hunting early on in his hunting career, and he took a shot at an animal and ended up wounding it and never was able to find it. And we were kind of walking through it because he's a pretty good shot. And went up in the deer blind. I was like, show me exactly where it was where you're shooting it. And it was 350 yards away. He thought it was like 120. And so he ended up injuring this animal. And, I was like, wow, your equipment here isn't really set up to fully identify, a deer as the sun's going down, to be able to tell, unless it was like a massive tank of a deer and you can tell it's like super mature, post-mature. But it wasn't the way it was described to me. So it's like, well, were you really able to identify the deer that far? It's a little out of your comfort zone, but the idea was
not really knowing, just sort
not
of like
knowing.
having a rangefinder.
Yeah,
helps,
so
yeah.
you have that tool there too. But
And-
so that's a tool that it helps you find your range. But like the cameras for us are having a good scope and a good set of binoculars to be able to identify that. And what we tell people around here, this is our management plan. This is our age class that we're trying to help out. Hey, there's a really bad flood. And this happened. There was actually a flood that happened, I think it was like 6 years ago now. Mm-hmm. And the next year when we were doing the game counts, I didn't see any 1.5-year-old deer. And so, because when we're observing them, they're in the fall. The bucks have antlers that you can be able to determine, different, ones, because whenever they drop their antlers, it's like, you don't know one from the other.
So you're saying the flood wiped out?
The flood wiped out. Well, yeah, because I called the wild game biologist, same guy that came out, and I was like, hey, I am not seeing any 1.5-year-old deer. Like, I'm baffled, man. I was like, I'm not sure what's going on. He goes, hey, remember that flood last year? Followed up with the other one? And it's like we had like a tax day flood and then Memorial Day flood. And
yeah.
It came tearing through here, and so there was a lot of, I guess, mortality for some of the herds here in these areas. Had a lot of creek beds and systems, and then there was another huge rain we had, I think, like right after the fawns hit the ground too. So it was just like
So it was like a gap.
There's a gap, and so that's why we might not see a lot. I think this would either be in like the 6.5 year, so like last year we didn't see a ton of mature, what we determine as fully mature is 5.5-year-old deer here. 6.5, mature is in a lot of places too, and kind of moving in towards post-mature after that, just because they're not living that as long. It's a rarity when one lives.
Yeah, and if you hunt here, you have to be able to recognize what are some of those key characteristics for a mature buck, and so there are sometimes where you get lucky, and there's an antlered deformity or of some sort, and maybe that buck is super identifiable. Without, you can just kind of look at the antlers and see like there's a drop tine or something, mm-hmm. And or like last year there was one that had a really significant kind of like crab claw.
You mean Clawsome?
Clawsome, that's right. And so haven't seen him yet.
I hope he comes back.
But that without some kind of funky feature on the antler, you really have to know what you're looking at, as a rule. And so there are these features, with the mature buck. You see the swaying belly, and there's a gland associated with rut behavior. That's the tarsal gland, and also the forehead has a gland on it as well. That's a scent gland that gets in an older buck that will get very, very dark and oily. And so there's and they look like they can barely walk because their bodies are so big and their legs are still kind of normal,
their legs
small,
look tiny,
or
right,
like the body, where the hoof is. And so these rules are important because it all plays into what you're trying to do with the you're trying to bring the deer herd to its best potential possible, which ties hand in hand with what you're trying to do with the land anyway. Like this.
Yeah.
This is a place where wildlife is supposed to thrive.
Right.
In your opinion.
And that's the other part of it too, that I feel like there's this connection too between the land that we're stewards of and that we're caretakers of right now, and like it what we're leaving behind is, this place becomes a legacy. It's not just like, oh, it's George's legacy. No, it's like it's because it's going to hopefully be passed down through future generations. I mean, we place in Southwest Texas, fifth generation landowner, like down there, that's it's a big part of the family history. And it's like, I think about Doug Duran and his quote, it's not ours, it's just our turn. It's kind of how I've felt for a long time. I always working with a lot of Native Americans, there's a common ideology of thinking about your decisions and how they affect the 7 generations down the line. And so what I want to do is kind of whatever I can do to help out here to build something to where there's all these things that you're improving while it's there, so that other people can enjoy it too, and they can enjoy this cycle of time. There was a time when I was the young hunter in the family, and there's a lot of attention put on the young hunter in the family, and then it's like you kind of grow up, and then if you have kids, then your kids become the attention. It's like, all right, it's not, maybe we're not going to sit here for 4.5 hours with the kiddo in the deer stand. Maybe we're going to find the real nice and prime hour and a half, and introduce them slowly to that. And maybe then they'll turn into wanting to stay out there all day and see what's moving around you, and take some cool pictures. Yeah, you're passing that on, and then you're passing on a healthier environment, and just improve it by whatever things you're doing. It continues to blossom, and it's just a great nourishing thing to see over the years. And 43 years old, it's like I've known this property since I was a baby, and there's a lot of learning to fish here with my grandfather, shooting guns with my uncle, and him teaching me about different, I think he moved me up to the first time I shot like a 410, and introduced me to shotguns, and I just learned a ton. And just what you learn growing up in this kind of environment, and I want my kiddos to have that as well, because I felt like it was such an enriching experience, and really connecting to the earth here with that, because it's in the city, it's just different in the concrete jungle. And growing up in Houston, it's just a different world there too. Yeah. And coming out here, it's like you don't know, man. It's the experience is, it's like spiritual, it's religious for some. It's you're really kind of connecting to like what is, I think, the joy of this life and this earth, and like getting to see like all these amazing animals and plants and fruits and fauna and flora. It's amazing.
You're connected with nature, and I think that's something you and I have talked about a whole lot. Like that ability to connect with nature is just so good for your soul, like for your spirit, for who we are as humans on this earth, and being able to pass that tradition down, and the stewardship that you feel for this particular place is very important. We are nothing wrong with technology, and nothing wrong with cities or anything like that. I mean, I make a life for myself in the city, and
sure.
But I think as a society, we do continue more and more to lose touch with that, and so. The more that you have that sort of, I'll call it attitude towards how you look over this property and share it with people like me is very important. I mean, those feelings you have are very infectious, like I love to come out here and on a hot July day and put some work in, just because I know it's like beneficial towards this greater idea. And also, a lot of things we do tie into a passion of hunting and the outdoors, and it's all sort of one big pot, and so I feel very grateful to be a part a small part of that, and it's I think you'd mentioned Doug Dern. I think it's a neat thing, that like he has that sharing the land initiative, and you've been doing that with your friends for some time, and have had people come through this place, and I think that it provides people like me who have there's other investments out there for our family. We reconnect to other places, like Colorado and things like
Right.
that. But just that ability to sort of just get out here at any time is really important.
Oh man, well, I appreciate all the things that you've always helped out with here and stuff too. You're, obviously a great friend, but you're a really great help out here. And because it's hard to do things, fully alone. And that's, having people who are invested in multiple reasons. You like this for, a lot of different things. We can bring our families here. We have these great experiences. We can go and pick, Mustang grapes and like dewberries, like you said, or whatever else it may be. And, pecans, and, we have those times too. And we're able to put meat in our freezer, and, meals for family. We know where our food comes from. We know how we got it there. And we're, creating all these cool, ways to cook it, and recipes we're following from our favorite chefs, and you're making our own stuff up. And there's all these things that still tie back to each one of those dinners. It's like you're still connected back to your time that was there. And then you remembered all the times that you worked hard to, put in to make sure that, you were maybe at the right place at the right time, or that you're, it feels almost like this reward too. It's like, wow, I've connected, I've lived, I've put a lot of myself, my love, my blood, sweat, tears into, improving the place, and then you're rewarded with, this harvest too. And it's like, my brother-in-laws that help out here, and I have uncle and cousin-in-laws, and I have, a deep family that cares about putting in time. And we recently lost one of our biggest helpers out here, Walter Horn. We called him Bishop, and it was my wife's stepdad, and kind of a man. He's just an all-around awesome dude.
That man could cut some grass too.
He could cut some grass. He really could. He really could. Want to cut some grass? Okay. Yes, he loved it. He loved being out here, and he'd like go mow a field. George, thank you so much for letting me mow that field. I'm like, dude, you were helping me out. Thank you.
I'll tell you what. I mean, he sat on the tractor and just it just fed like we were mentioning earlier. Just feeds your soul. Just again to be in the environment.
Diesel therapy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like he and I think a lot of other people too. When you're doing some of those things too, it does feed your soul. And he loved being out there and seeing all the things run around, and working on it and seeing the improvements we made throughout the years, and kind of, okay, cool, wow, you guys put this road through here, and now you've, helped develop this pond. You have this, rebuild this levee to, be able to keep more water in there for the wildlife. The different improvements you make, you see it, and then you see the bounty of those changes and come about, and you're like, wow, cool. And he loved being a part of that and had his finger on the pulse. This was like his dream to have this kind of thing. I mean, he had lived a dream life for some. He worked for NASA. He was in charge of the soil samples they brought back. Like, he was growing
it's incredible
gardens with it. Like, this guy, man, he was something else. Oh man. So yeah, it's it's then you realize too somebody's contribution when they're not there, or they can't be there. He was in the hospital for a bit, and so that's kind of a big void. It's like who can help fill those shoes, and it's a lot of times it takes multiple people, and it's those dynamics happen sometimes with family properties, and sometimes they're too much to manage for people, or they get sold. Sometimes out here the big ranches get sold into ranchettes, and it's a little smaller, and it kind of eventually dwindles down, and or areas get developed in a different way than just wide open spaces.
Yeah, boundary lines get pushed around.
Totally. So those dynamics change.
Yeah, and like coming back around to this idea of someone like me coming out here and joining you on like opening day like this, and just throughout the year, these work trips. I know something of late that's come up, and well, this person ultimately be a podcast guest, and you mentioned him earlier, Doug Dern. I feel like my role here is a little bit like what that initiative that he has is, like come here, do some work, help out around the ranch, and then, there's meat in the freezer at the end of the year, and I think people are benefiting from this in that initiative.
Yeah, it's kind of, the whole idea is linking together land users and land owners and being able to find ways that they can have partnerships together that both benefit them. Depending what their end goal is, a land user might want to fill their freezer with meat. They might want to forage for some things around someone's property. Maybe they want to go fishing. Maybe they want to go camping. Maybe they just want to. Maybe they're birders. Maybe they want to go and check out cool trees, or pick some pecans from some of the pecan trees, or
Those dewberries and Mustang grapes you were talking about
exactly,
earlier.
exactly. Those kinds of things too. Depending on where you are, there's a lot of different, types of crops or wild, foods that you can go and benefit from. And so, yeah, it sounds like to me from, experiences from hearing Doug on, the Meat Eater podcast and on the show as well, and through many of the talks he's done and things, that he was kind of this example. His property was kind of a blueprint of this idea, and I think that's where he had people come out to hunt his land, and they helped him out, depending on what it may be. Maybe someone knows how to run a tractor and they can run a tractor, or maybe somebody is really good with like trimming trees to where they'll produce more mast. There might be certain things that someone knows, an arborist, that comes out and helps them out. And there's a lot of different types of things you can do at each person's property. Some folks might need help with certain programs with the USDA, with the NRCS, and being able to, do environmental, enhancements or the protection of certain areas. And so maybe you have someone that goes out there and they know what they're doing as far as being able to identify certain, plants or species, and maybe things that are non-indigenous that you need to get rid of, or, saying, oh, we need to protect this area. It's a really good pollinator area, whatever it may be. And whenever you have those kinds of connections and you do some work on that property, then the benefit on that side is maybe you get to go and, play around on the land a bit too. There's a lot of legalities and things too that come to play that I think people need to think about. But if you have everything set up, it's not as worrisome. I think some landowners are afraid of letting people come onto their property to help them, or, to hunt or whatever it may be. And then you have certain places where they lease it out for hunting, right? And it's like, but there's always agreements upon, there's always, you're kind of going to be creating a profile when you go to sharing the land, whether you're the land user or the land owner, and you're going to be able to walk through that. And, Doug's done this. He's going to be able to help everybody piecemeal what it is together that they're looking for. And having that kind of personal experience of friends and family who've worked around here, and yourself too, it's like it takes a lot to run a property, and you really need to have sometimes all hands on decks for big projects, and mowing just the lanes and keeping things travelable. It's a year-round exercise. I mean,
It takes a lot. It takes a lot.
we talked about like the
and
trees
energy.
and stuff too. It's like there's gonna be something in the middle of the day. You're driving. Oh, okay. Last night was a storm. You got to cut this tree up. So there's a lot of surprises that come, and it takes a lot of work. And so you need to have people that are willing to help out. You can't do it alone.
It's gonna be great to hear him go through all that, and sort of how it all started. And I look forward to having that conversation. And one thing that's really cool is that another business of yours, Map My Ranch, is a sponsor, and Colin Williams, the other half of that business of yours, he'll be showing up here very very soon, and it's really cool that you could be a part of something that you experience with your own land, but it's kind of a nationwide initiative, and these businesses can all sort of like help sponsor and really uplift that initiative that he has going.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a lot of really cool sponsors that are part of that. OnX, there's Vortex. There's a handful of others there. Guide Fitters. I'm trying to remember. Savage is in there. There's a company that works with trout fishing.
Yeah, a lot of different folks.
On our end of things, we're going to be offering through Map My Ranch as a sponsor. We're going to be making maps for the land owners that maybe they'll be sharing with the land users too. But what we're going to do is, find out where their property is, go ahead and put a boundary map in. If they want to have specific custom items, we have, all sorts of different icons for whatever it is. If they're maybe down in Texas and they have, feeders and, water troughs and, game trail cameras or hog traps or whatever it is they want to identify on the land, or different pastures, we can outline them different colors and, label them and whatnot. Or, if it's just really out in backwoods, kind of areas where there's no hunting stands, it's just wide open. Well, you can identify, some game trails or, where, we can have the elevation chains. You can look at, this really good lookout spot here. You can glass for a long ways over here. Whatever it may be, we're going to custom tailor that to each landowner, just like we do with our clients at Map My Ranch, because everybody's property is different and people are always doing improvements. And so you want to be able to track those throughout the years. We have some maps at our ranch in Southwest Texas that are back from like the 40s and 50s. And then we have some that, you can also see historically how it's developed. And especially if you have land users coming in and they're going to be helping you with something as a landowner, you might have a map this year that's going to look totally different than what you have, next year whenever we've cleared these fields, we planted these crops, and you can identify those, and we can have different highlighted areas on the map to show that, this is a part of this program that's with the NRCS, and maybe this is our pollinator area. You can label it all, and that way land user comes around, you're like, here's our map, and we'll give them like one of the weatherproof maps. It's a really, really cool field map. I know you've seen them, but they're foldable, they're tear resistant, they're water resistant, great for having in the field. I have a 2x3 foot one in my property. I keep it folded in my back pocket when we're going around. Man, I'll sit down and
I have
you
one
forget
in my
it's there.
backpack.
Yeah. It's super
as a user.
handy, man. And it's amazing how often we use that. And that's nothing against the idea of like a digital application such as OnX, which is, it's so valuable. And being able to have that data at your hand and, in real time where you're walking, especially out west, if you have, certain boundary issues, you can't go into private land and there's no fence lines like there are in Texas. Barbed wire is pretty good delineation of, land ownership there. And
Sure, yeah.
so I'm not crossing fence lines, right? But when you're out in, the Wild West and you're, or hunting wherever you are or just backpacking or whatever it is you may be doing, maybe you're going out there to catch some fresh trout.
There's not always a clear indication of the boundary.
There isn't. And so you have an app there, but having a paper map that's, you can fold out, that's large to be able to look at, it's really awesome to have that as a resource. And that's how our company started, actually, is because
you needed that
we needed a map
resource
for the ranch,
yeah.
man. And Colin's a GIS wizard, right? So he came out with this is a long time ago, but he went out with, I think it was like a $5,000 GPS unit that, its level of accuracy was like within 1 foot, and he was using it through a company he's working with. And so he brought it out just so we can try it out and pinpoint certain things around the property. And we ended up making this map and showed it to our friends. And one of them's like, oh, man, you should map my ranch.
There it is. Yeah. and we'll hear from him shortly on what his role is and what his side is. And what is it? What part do you play in that business?
Well, I am not the GIS guy. So to start off, it's that very clearly that Colin and, our other team members that come in here and there, we got some folks that are helping us, produce these maps because we're getting so busy. And so he's the one who's kind of organizing and managing that. And he's actually making sure that they're providing the proof. We call it the draft. And we're going to send over a draft map, make sure everything looks good. And if it is, you sign off on it, pay for the prints, and we ship them. And so that's kind of the role there that I'm not. The role that I do is I do all the marketing. I'm out there in different hunting forums and just getting out and making business-to-business partnerships. Really involved in leveling, just the marketing aspect of things and trying to take that to the next level. And we have some really great partners we've worked with, Bison Coolers, Texas Trophy Hunters. We've worked with a bunch of different guys that make some amazing equipment, hog traps, feeders, outdoor addictions, hunting, oahunting.com, outdoor addictions. Those guys make some really good feeders. So we've kind of teamed up and helped, work and bring business to each other because, folks that are in the hunting world, it's like, he can be able to tell them, hey, I got a client who makes maps and, and I can be like, hey, if you want some good feeders. These things that they're very seamless at first. It's just some connections that you make. You just kind of build them up into really cool business-to-business marketing developments. And it's kind of what we did with the sharing the land. It's like we're a sponsor, but we love to be a part of this growth, and we know how valuable it is as a landowner, or myself. I know how it is. Colin's helped me, and he's been a part of this, ranch and ranch Southwest Texas ever since we were friends, in our preteen years, and he's been a part of it. And just when he drives around and see all the development that we've had here, it's amazing what we've done throughout 10 years on this property here in Central Texas that he can bear witness to. And we have all these maps to show the historical development of the place. And it's just really cool to sit back and see that. And so I'm excited to work with these landowners and sharing the land and kind of have them have this cool, piece of art on the wall, as well as the tool in their hands and in their back pocket. It's amazing how many hours you end up spending staring in front of a map of your place.
Oh, for sure.
Or where you're going to hunt, or where you're going to hike, or whatever it is. It's really
You're
cool
seeing
to see a big one.
everything in your head play out, and it's going to be fantastic to talk to Doug, and it's the start of, like we've said before, it's the start of hunting season, and there's other podcasts you have coming up here that are going to be of that genre, and there's a lot of exciting things happening with Son of a Blitch.
Yeah, we've got some really, really great interviews coming up. Doug Duran is one that I'm supremely excited about. Anybody who isn't familiar, I highly encourage you can just do like a search on either podcasts or like on YouTube, or even just, do your regular old Google search, and you can see a lot of his contributions, Stars in the Sky documentary, all the meat eater stuff. There's a bunch of podcasts he's done. He's been a speaker around the country on different topics of land management, CWD, just a lot of different things. And that's some really cool, valuable resources that are out there to kind of learn about there too. So yeah, really, really, really excited for that podcast. Got another one going to be coming up probably later in the fall with Josh Smith from Montana Knife Company. You saw that knife last night that I picked up from them. My goodness, it's amazing.
Beautiful.
I mean, he's
gorgeous
an
product.
artist. Oh, a bladesmith, it's just the best, man. So he was the youngest to become a master bladesmith at like 19 years old, and like in the world, no one has ever done it that young. And so he's been doing this for decades now, and has some just amazing products that he's put out there. They're phenomenal knives. So I highly encourage everybody to check out Montana Knife Company too. John Norris, who people may have heard him on the Joe Rogan podcast or on the Meat Eater podcast. He's a game warden, and he retired now, but he was involved with setting up some special divisions to battle the issues that were going on in state parks and in national parks and in abandoned land of cartels coming in and growing marijuana fields. And there's the environmental destruction that comes about from that. You imagine all the pesticides and all the things that they're spraying on this, and it's getting into the water systems. It might be abundant trout areas, and all of a sudden it's like the water's been poisoned. And it's not only a safety aspect, for people. It's criminal activity, and in some of these states where things like there is legal marijuana in some of these states, but you still got people who are growing it out there illegally, and the stuff that they're spraying on this, and where it ends up getting it, make people real sick, and it's like killing the wildlife around there because it's designed to kind of make sure they don't eat any of the plants or anything. And it was an issue that he was on the forefront of because he, and we'll talk about that experience too in further detail. And he's talked about it on those two podcasts I mentioned earlier, but talking about how he was one of the first to have to battle this, and what it was like walking into this and seeing how widespread of an issue this was. And he has written a couple books about it. He's also worked with V Knives, which they make some incredible knives. And so, yeah, that's going to be real fun to talk about that aspect of things. We also have from Field to Plate, Jeremiah Dowdy. He's an amazing chef that so you can go check him out on Food to Plate on Instagram and
yeah.
really see some of the dishes he's created. And That's really neat. You know, we just obviously launched that series within this podcast of Wild Game Wednesdays, where we're going to meet with chefs that prepare wild game and talk to them and get their tips and tricks from, you know, preparation in the field to preparation in the kitchen. There's a lot of other chefs that are going to be a part of that Wild Game series. And a lot of other folks in the hunting industry. There's so much out there, so many amazing products and companies, and I've reached out to a lot of really, you know, leaders in the industry, and they're going to be coming on here and talking about that. So yeah, it's really exciting, man. It's going to be fun.
Speaking of exciting, I look forward to tomorrow morning waking up and seeing some dove flying around.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too, man. So all right, good night, everybody. We'll be tuning in again soon.
So much fun. Thanks, man.
Cheers.